I remember, I can't spit out the date and time and blah, blah, but I remember the exact moment when we decided to draw a line in the sand about not mixing the two at home. Like it came to a point where all we were doing was talking about business. And it was like,
All right, so the man sitting with me today, I'm very excited to have him on here. He's an entrepreneur, a business owner, the CEO and co-founder of the award-winning SOS Charging Solutions, which has been around for just about an entire decade right now. You hold those exact same titles with Simpl.AR, which we're going to get into what that is in a second. Big advocate on kind of moving the AR space and the mixed reality and all that's going on in that world. And weirdly enough, also a DJ. So I'm very excited to welcome
yeah,
Joel Olandesca onto the podcast. Thanks so
right
much, Joel.
on. Yeah, thanks for having me on. Looking
Now,
forward to our conversation.
yeah, this should be really good. Just really quickly, if you want to like set the stage for people on like what is kind of SOS Solutions, kind of what was it, where is it now? Let's
Mhm.
give us a quick kind of rundown on what that looks like.
Sure. Yeah. And so you mentioned two companies. So the SOS Charging Solutions is sort of our, I would say it's our foundation company. It's been around. We're coming on 10 years this year, which is amazing. Um, I don't know. Do you count the COVID years like the shutdown, because we were literally shut down for like 2.5 years, no movement.
Yeah,
So, but whatever. Let's 10 years. We started the
sure.
company 10 years
10 years
ago.
sounds good.
Is what we did.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was so what we do with SOS is we provide mobile device charging solutions to live events all across North America, some overseas. They're tabletop, they're self-powered, no electricity required. We fully brand all of our charging stations. We have a couple of different products that are kind of niche to what we do. People come to us very specifically for the products that we have. Yeah, and our goal is to keep people charged up, bring eyes and attention to brands at the event. Um, and what's lovely about all that is we learned very quickly at the very beginning that our charging stations um, were tools in helping people connect at events because
Mm,
they were tabletop. So people would plug in, gather around the tables and whatnot, and all of a sudden conversations would just start happening around that.
yeah.
So that was a really neat factor in what it was. So yeah, like yes, we provide charging to events,
But it's more than that.
but it's way more than that, which is
Yeah.
which is really really cool.
I hadn't considered that. Obviously, I'm aware of what SOS Solutions does, but
Mhm.
I hadn't thought of it under that lens where the fact of like now instead of somebody sitting on the floor beside one of those little ports in the corner of a room
Little
trying to charge their
outlet, yeah,
phone,
yeah,
yeah, they're actually interacting around a table, which is very
yeah.
smart, and which is why you brand them as well, because then of course you get that attention onto those. You mentioned that obviously, like many companies during the COVID-19 pandemic, because you were event based, it completely obviously shut down your company, which probably came obviously as a surprise, like COVID did to many of us.
Yeah,
And out of that was born another company, right? So,
right.
what's the story behind that? Like, what does that look like? How did that
Yeah,
experience sort of feel for you guys?
yeah. Simpl.AR is the other company that we now have as well that we run in tandem with SOS. So Simpl.AR, that company, we do web-based augmented reality activations for live events and experiential marketing. So yeah, we're playing with tech in that case. It's a tech startup,
Yeah.
like you mentioned. Like we did create that company during all of the shutdowns, but it wasn't what people call quote unquote a pivot, because we were exploring augmented reality years before um, 2020,
Mm-hmm.
because the branding on our charging stations played such a huge part in what we provide to events. We were A number of years ago, we started looking at different ways to level up the branding on our charging stations, and we started looking at augmented reality and seeing, okay, how can we incorporate AR into our products so that
So
if
you
you were
were already starting to look at that prior
yeah
to
prior
COVID coming
to
out.
yeah Yeah,
So
and
was
that's
COVID a
something
bit
we
more of just like an accelerator then for you guys? Like, oh, we
it
got
was
to
a
push this
huge
now.
accelerator. Yeah. It definitely accelerated it quite a bit because once the pandemic started, live events were completely shut down, right? As we know, everything was shut down, especially live events. And because SOS is a physical rental company for live events, we could not move any of our inventory. So that allowed us to, after everything sort of settled in and we all realized that we are going to be in a lot longer than we expected, we sat down as a team and said, okay, well, what are we doing? What are we going to do here? What do we want to do? Um, and that's when we knew that we were already looking at AR. It was a back burner project. We would play with it only when we had time, which we didn't. And then of course now we have all the time in our lives to do whatever we wanted to. So we started really looking into augmented reality as a technology to create in and to provide to the events and customers that we get to work with. Um, Once we started really playing around with it and looking at what the capabilities of AR of ARR capabilities of
That's a
AR,
mouthful.
it's a mouthful. We started to realize that okay, there's a lot more here than we initially thought that we could do with it. Uh, it our Mike, our who we originally brought onto the team 3 months prior to the pandemic starting,
Oof.
we brought him on as our VP Biz Dev and Sales. We discovered that he had a CompuSci background that he had just sort of shelved for a number of years. He comes forward and says, "Well, I sort of have a, like basic coding knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
This AR is perfect. I want to keep working. We want to keep him employed." And we said, okay, let's do it. Like, let's figure this out and start to really dig into AR, realize it had its own legs, and that we could really take it a lot larger than our charging stations. And here we are 2.5, 3 years later, and it's spreading like wildfire. Like it's an amazing, um, it's an amazing thing that we've created, in my opinion. Like it's just
Yeah.
completely like not expected
I was just
to
thinking
what
that
it's
because it
run into.
it sounds like you were kind of plugging away at it, so to speak. But then obviously COVID just it hit the go button. You had to kind of make some big
Yeah.
changes. What if you had to sort of look at that and go, some of the things that maybe you would have ended up doing had you not been pushed to do so? Like what were some of the like what are some of those things that are now, if you look at it, you go, if COVID hadn't happened, we never would have created this to look the way it does.
Yeah, it's funny because we talk about that quite often, like where we would be if COVID hadn't happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if Alicia and Mike might have differing opinions, but I honestly think that if COVID hadn't happened, actually, if COVID hadn't happened, Simpl.AR would not be a thing at this point in time.
Yeah, straight up.
We just wouldn't have had time really to put that much focus on it
Mm-hmm.
and really dive into that deeply into it. We would still be playing around with it, and maybe we're like, hey, we've got some things here and here that we can try out, continue to try out and test. And I think that that's the case for a lot of a lot of industries, right? A lot of
Yeah.
different pieces of it. I think a lot of the technology that we play with nowadays, like even like what you and I are doing right now, like just virtual podcast
Mm-hmm.
or recording, a lot of that stuff wouldn't have been sped up if it
Yeah,
wasn't for the need to.
it's the interesting like positive side of something like a global pandemic that immediately creates this need to innovate and change and adapt,
Huge. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting that you mentioned that Alicia and Mike might have differing opinions. For those of you listening, there I'm going to have Alicia on, so it'll be interesting to hear the differences that you say and what she says from it. But I'm curious if they're in the years prior to SOS Solutions kind of starting Simpl.AR,
Mm.
were there some lessons in those first early years of creating SOS Solutions that you then kind of enabled you to adapt quickly when you needed
Oh,
to
huge.
create
Yeah,
Simpl.AR?
absolutely. Yeah, like so many lessons learned in creating a business from scratch as entrepreneurs, that we applied to the creation of Simpl.AR. Like for example, like when we Simpl.AR was known as SOS WebAR up until like
Okay.
a couple of months ago, right? So we had created it off of the original branding that we had for SOS, and we did that for recognition purposes because our industry already knew our brand for SOS charging. So we knew that if we were going to create something new out of it, that it had to be recognizable. So that was one reason for doing that. But there's so many lessons learned. Um, we're treating it like officially as a tech startup. We're not bootstrapping, because we know that we don't have time to bootstrap Simpl.AR at this point.
Mm.
Like we got to move quickly if we want to achieve certain things that we have on our roadmap, right? Um, and there's a lot of really cool stuff that we're building on the back end. So there's no way that we're gonna stretch it out over 5 years
To bootstrap the whole
to,
thing,
to
and so
boost.
you are looking
Yeah,
at ways to be like, how do we accelerate this?
totally.
How do we make it happen
Yeah.
faster? Does that level of accelerated growth that you're like, we need to have, I guess, what kind of pressures does that put on the team, and then how do you guys manage to deal with that, being like, yeah, we're gonna hit this target, and we're gonna do it faster than we want to.
Yeah, I just look back at like the last 2.5, 3 years, and the many, many, many conversations that we've had with Mike, who's an employee of ours, right? Like he's our lone employee at this point in time, but um, we wanted to make sure that we were very transparent with him throughout the whole
Mm.
entire thing. Like on a month to month basis, we didn't know if we were going to have a company to, right? So you got to prep people for that. And we had to prep ourselves even. Um,
How
we had
how
to,
do
we
you
had,
prep yourself to deal with the fact that you might lose your company in 30 days?
uh, I don't know if there's like a formula to do it, but there's, you know, being entrepreneurs and sort of starting your own thing from scratch, from the ground up. There's a lot of resiliency that you learn. There's a lot
Mm.
of adversity that you have to go through to get it from point A to point B. So we deployed a lot of that on an
Mm.
individual and on a team basis, right? um, Alicia and I have like really long, deep conversations about the future and where we're currently at, what the future is going to look like. Like, what are we going to do to keep, um, Mike on the team, keep him happy, keep him motivated, and ourselves as well, right? Like, uh, I think one of the hardest things that Alicia and I have to share is the fact that we're business owners and also like we're married to each other.
Yeah.
So what we go through is not separated. Like if we're going through issues at home or if we're going through issues in the business, we're sharing that 24/7. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that plays a huge part in people's relationship, right? And we get that question all the time. It's like, how do you two how do you
I
two survive what you do as a
yeah.
couple? Because that's what we go through. Like it literally is a 24/7 thing.
Yeah,
So
so they say that being in business is like being married to somebody, right? But
yeah.
you guys have kind of doubled down on that. The fact that you're married, you have kids,
Yeah.
and you're in business together, right? Like
Yeah.
there's a lot going on there, as you said. Like you're kind of with that person 24/7 all the time. What are the pros and cons to that, of being both in a relationship with somebody and in business with them? Like what's
I
that balance
see
feel like?
over time I've recognized tons of pros to it.
Mm.
Um, Believe it or not. There's
I mean, it's working so far.
the one thing that comes to mind always is communication. Like because we've had to make really, really hard decisions on the company end of things, we've had to learn how to communicate with each other very clearly, very succinctly, um, without bringing the personal side to it, because that obviously
Mm.
trickles in as well, right? So from the get go, we said to each other that if we're going to do this, it's family first always. When we're making business decisions, the business decisions can't always necessarily, we can't factor in personal into a lot of it. So there's very, very strict lines that we follow, that we stay
Mm,
behind or in front of when we're making
depending on
decisions
the
like that, depending on the situation.
Yeah, how do you that can be that can be very challenging for people, right, to draw that line for themselves
Hmm.
to being like, okay, this is a personal decision we're making, this is a business decision that we're making. Are there certain things that you guys do as couples or that you guys do individually that help you do that to, like almost change that hat? Is it like situational? How does that work?
It
Because
is
that's an
very
incredibly challenging thing.
situational, but we do. I don't know. Like we're. I think we're natural dreamers. So
Mm,
even before we started like we always talk about like where we want to be, right? So because that's what keeps you moving forward is like
yeah.
if you either have like a short term, long term end goal, that's what keeps you motivated and driven to keep hitting those next marker points. So like we've always been that way as a couple, but I know for a fact that communications wise, the business itself has really helped us communicate a lot more clearly on the
Hmm.
personal side of things, and vice versa.
Yeah. Do you think that has to do with a level of kind of transparency that you have to have in order to do that? That
Yeah.
maybe you wouldn't necessarily have with somebody you were just in business with, you maybe wouldn't have the comfort of being that transparent with on, like you said, let's look at the future, let's look at the problems we're having and stuff
Hmm.
like that.
Yeah, I think it depends on the role that you have in the company. Because like I think if I had a business partner who I wasn't married to, that communication still has to be that clear,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah. No, I agree completely. You have to have that transparency, um, really to make things work.
Yeah,
Both the good and the bad, right? You
yeah,
have to be able to talk about those kinds of things because they come hand in hand all
they
the
do
time,
come hand in hand. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. With with kind of just to jump back a little bit into communication and stuff like that. Going into the pandemic, when that happened, like what was sort of your guys' mindset and communication as you made looking back now, what looks like a successful, whether you want to call it pivot or new enterprise, right? What was it like then though, like in that kind of moment when
Like
it
in the
kind
thick
of,
of things, as we were sort of
yeah,
deciding on creating that
yeah,
extra
because now it
company.
looks great. You're like, cool, they made this thing,
Yeah,
awesome, good on them. But
yeah.
like, take me back to like how it was during that.
It was it was a lot of so I there were a lot of factors that played a role in it being successful. So I'll talk about like the community factor alone, like that
Mm,
because of the industry that we're in, the events industry, that over time had allowed us to really um, build deep relationships with a number of our different clients and customers, and I'm talking global, right? Like we have a great community globally that we can reach out to if needed. So um, when we started talking about AR, we had a community to go to get feedback from. So we would work on things as a team, assuming, um, just based off knowledge we had, assuming that event professionals needed something like this, and we would take it to them, and we would get their feedback on it,
mm.
just like straight up feedback. Are we going down the right path, or are we wasting our time? Right?
So you very much did that thing where like we're gonna product test every single step of the way to
Every
make sure that
step of the
we are
way. In the
meeting
beginning, we
needs.
had to because we didn't know when stuff was going to start coming back to life, like business wise, and then B, we didn't want to, put all this work into something and then in the end find out that it wasn't something that anybody really wanted or needed.
Yeah. No, which a lot of people don't generally do. They generally build something assuming people need it, they launch it, and then they find out that maybe it is or it isn't needed, right? What
Yeah,
leads you guys to think, because it looks like from my perspective anyways, that even SOS charging solutions is there to answer a need. Very
yeah,
much so, right?
yeah.
So what is it? So it seems like you guys kind of did that right out the gate with the first company and now with this new one. What is it about you guys that makes you aware that that's what needs to get done? Like, where did that learning come from?
I would have to give credit to just again being constant dreamers. Uh,
Mm,
I'm I'm always I'm a very observant person, so I'm always just observing like what's happening anyways in general in the environment, um, looking for gaps. Not looking for gaps on purpose because I want to fix them, but recognizing where there are gaps and then thinking of, oh well, what if what if there was this to help
to
fix
fill
that,
that.
like to fill that gap,
Mm,
that kind of thing. So that like that's I'm always future forward thinking.
yeah.
So um, whether
You,
that be like 6 months down the road, a year, 5 year, 10 year, like those kinds of things are always on my radar.
mm,
So it's and that keeps us like moving along, I think.
yeah. Which is good. It's what's interesting about that though, and you mentioned a couple times now that the both of you are dreamers. You tend to kind of think big, think forward, where we're going, forward thinking, right? A lot of people who do that tend to have a hard time then coming back to like the immediate to dos,
The
right?
reality.
They're the reality, right? They're big
Yeah.
dreamers, they're idea people, but then it's very hard to turn that idea into action. But
Yeah.
you guys have managed that. So how what's the secret, Joel? What's the secret to turning dreams into action?
uh I we it is very, if you know Alicia, like if you know our company, you know that the two of us, specifically the two of us, stick to our lanes. So we,
Okay.
from the like then going back 10 years, like 10 years ago, we started the company. I had in my head assigned tasks to what we were both individually going to do, right? Like I'm not a numbers person. Alicia loves numbers. Like
Mm,
she loves
okay.
numbers. It's not even funny. So for me, it's like okay, if you want to take care of numbers, be the numbers person, because I'm not like interested in it, and B, you're better at it. And then on more like the creative and on the creative and like planning side, logistics side of it, like that's where I come in. And that's just stuff that we individually sort of um, built off of previous to creating the company, right? Like in our
Mm,
corporate years, like in my corporate days, like that's where I learned a lot of skill through that. So a lot of the stuff that I learned from my corporate days, working for a huge telecom company, a lot of that stuff transferred over to how we created the business, the processes that we have in the business, all that stuff. So very thankful for the years that I had in
mm-hmm.
that time. So a lot of those skills come into play, and then um, we made it very clear once we started the business that like if you're going to take care of these things, you stay there, and vice versa. And
Yeah.
I think that right there plays a huge role. Like if you're looking for a secret, that I don't even know if that's a secret, but that's like it.
I
I think that a
yeah.
lot of people sometimes, not intentionally, but like they'll cross over.
Mm.
Like, oh, don't worry, I'll help you with invoicing, and I'll help you with bookkeeping, and like if I was to do that, it would muddy the waters too much.
In order to do that, you present a very humble approach, which I think is where a lot of people will challenge with that. You've kind of given yourself the ability to say, "I'm not good at this thing," and you are good at it, so you go do it. Which I think was where a lot of people struggle. They feel the need to become good at that thing, or show that they are good at that thing.
Hmm.
So there's quite a lot of humble ability put into that. Where does that come from for you? Is that something that you grew up with? Is it something that came out of something else? Where did you learn that ability to go, I'm not good at this thing. I'm going to let somebody else who's much better at it tackle it?
That I don't think I was like that from the beginning. Like I don't
was
I
that was it hard lessons that taught you that? Was
no,
it
not hard lessons at all. Like I think we just know, like as entrepreneurs, like every entrepreneur says it, right? Like we wear many hats.
yeah.
Like we always wear many. Like you have to wear many hats if you're going to start a business. You're going to be an entrepreneur, whether you're like a solopreneur or if you have a team around you. Um, But I'm a firm believer in, if you're not an expert at something, find the expert to help you out with it. I'm a
Mm-hmm.
firm believer in that, right? I don't need to, and I say this all the time to the team. I'm like, I don't need to know the ins and outs of what Alicia's doing and what Mike's doing,
Mm.
but I do know enough. I know enough, right? I know enough to keep the business moving, and I know enough to keep projects moving, and I know enough to see where we can be in the future and where we are currently. So that's my take on it: is know enough to keep things going, but you don't have to be an expert in everything. That I don't think.
Mm-hmm.
I think that just causes in the long run burnout if you're trying to be the
Yeah.
expert at everything.
I really like that. I think that's really, really important insight that many people tend to gloss over. I think we're taught almost in a way to work on our kind of failings almost in a way, right? Like, oh,
Yes.
identify your weaknesses and then develop
Yeah.
them. It's like
Yeah.
I always have this mindset of like, well, what if we identify our strengths
Right.
and build on
Yeah.
those,
Yeah. We
and
play to
then
our
find
strengths for
people who,
sure.
yeah, and it seems like you guys do exactly. Is and I'm curious because I wanna ask Alisha this question as well. But what are some things that you take on your plate that you know that you're good at, and what are things that you still lean on heavily for Alisha for? And then I'm curious on what her response is going to be from the start.
um, let's see. Yeah, like it's funny because if if I think about it, like the list it's very clear on either side. Like
Just impressive that you can,
I know
yeah,
exactly what my day to day tasks are and what her day to day tasks are. And then a lot of that again goes back to the communication pieces. Like we're just constantly communicating. What are we doing today? What's on your list? What needs to be prioritized? Blah blah blah. Like, and we just do that as a team in general on a daily basis. But um, uh, biz dev falls under me for sure. I think.
I guess here's a better way of looking at this. What is the biggest thing that
Mhm.
you tend to lean on Alisha to do, and what is the biggest thing that she tends to lean on you for?
uh, I definitely lean on Alicia for making sure that our numbers are crisp,
Mm,
and that's what I mean. Is like she loves dissecting numbers down to like the nth degree that, and for me, I just have no interest in doing that.
mm-hmm.
Like I'm interested in the high level piece of it, like because like I said, you need to know enough.
Yeah,
So I know enough of our numbers at a high level, but I lean on her to really do the digging around it
gotcha.
to keep us moving, right?
Yeah,
It's very time consuming, um, and she has her systems down very strictly and straight with it. So that stuff helps a lot.
yeah. Interesting. It's really I just find it fascinating that you're able to draw those lines so clearly and step back and enable her to do that. Another thing I wanted to touch on actually as well that I think you guys have a unique perspective on is um, as startups and entrepreneurs and stuff like that. What really differentiates you guys from employees is your inability to almost leave work behind in a way,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Yeah,
where work is part of your life. It's what you do, and especially
yeah,
for you guys because you're married, it really does come home with you in that sense, right? It's not like it'd be really hard to leave it at the door. I imagine. How do you balance that? How do you balance that level of your work life balance being not in balance at all?
yeah. Well, I remember I can't spit out the date and time and blah, blah, but I remember the exact moment when we decided to draw a line in the sand about not mixing the two at home. Like
Mm-hmm.
it came to a point where all we were doing was talking about business, and it was like, like
Wow.
on our drive to Banff, we were talking about business when we were like waiting for the kids to leave, like get home from school or come home from like, it was business. When we decided to like go on a date or go for dinner, like guess what would
It
pop
was
into our
business.
conversation? It was business. So it came to a point like, and I think this would have been like 3 years into the business, 2.5, 3 years into the business. Um, and I know Alicia's going to get into like more the mental health side of it, because
Totally.
that's what played a huge part in making this decision, because there's a lot of, um, like you're 2.5, 3 years into a business, you're still struggling at that point. You're not, depending on the type of business, you're not might not necessarily be
Yeah.
at a point where you're like running at 100K an hour, like
Yeah.
everything's
You're not definitely not in
set.
the green yet.
You're definitely not in the green at that point. And um, it was like, I remember sitting down one evening and saying, okay, we need to decide here at 3 p.m. And at this point, the kids were still young. Like at 3 p.m. when the kids come home on a Friday, business is done. Like we got to shut
Mm,
our laptops off. No more business talk until Sunday night. Like that was
interesting.
that was the decision we made.
Yeah.
Um, and we stuck to that because we were starting to see too much business talk, and it was affecting our life in general, right?
Yeah.
And there were reasons for why we were talking about business to that degree. Like a lot of it had to do with, like, there was a lot of survival involved around that time.
Yeah, because what's
So
interesting about this is that you hear a lot of people. I know, like Alex Harmozy is definitely one of them, who is like, oh, him and his wife talk about business like all the time. He's like, we're obsessed with it. That's why we are, where we are, and they're a $1 billion couple now, and
mm,
stuff like that. So you kind of see that happening, but like you guys said, you saw how it was affecting your home life. And obviously, they don't have kids, so it's a different scenario. What I'm curious on though is because you drew that line in the sand, you said, okay, enough is enough. We have to have business, and we have to have life. What benefits have you noticed both in your life and in your business because of drawing that line in the sand?
um, the the boundary, I think you mean like the boundaries are very clear.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if like we're able to tell each other, it's like, okay, yeah, no more biz talk at this
Yeah.
point, right?
So has that
It's not like
helped?
we
Like,
it's not like we schedule it or anything. We just know for a fact that like if it's a Friday night, we're not going to talk about business,
yeah,
right? Like if something comes in and we have to address it, then of course like we will, because we're such a small team,
yeah,
and we have to address it at that point. We will, but we don't let it take over the weekend.
yeah,
One of the best things we ever
yeah.
did was
I would say what, like, yeah.
we
What's like the
removed.
benefits that
Well,
you get from that?
the benefits from that are like actually having conversations that aren't business related.
Like, I get to be a
You
human
know what I
for a
mean? Like
while.
yeah,
Yeah.
like we
Okay.
can actually sit, like we can actually go grab ice cream on a Friday night with the kids and
Yeah.
actually enjoy ice cream. The-
Yeah.
it, I think one of the best things we did once it got to that point that we were able to was actually moving the business out of the house and
Into a shared workspace or
into
something.
yeah, like you see it right behind me right here actually, right? But so
Mm-hmm.
shout out to like all the co-working that we've been through over the last number of years, like we having a place for the business and
Mm.
not having it overtake the office at home, the entrance to the home, our basement, our garage. Like we had inventory everywhere in our house, so it didn't matter where you looked, you couldn't escape it. So it was very easy for you to like, you know, if I walked into the office to like check on something,
Or
lo and
even just
behold,
see
I'd
it.
be there
Yeah.
45 minutes later still because I happened to turn my laptop on.
It's literally there in your physical
It's
environment.
literally there in my face. And I love now how, depending on our load, our workload, there are times when, I'll come home in the evening, I'll put my bag aside and I don't touch it till the next morning.
Mm.
Because that separation is there. And those and it's, I know it's tough, like I get it, especially in the world that we live in now where work from home and hybrid, blah blah blah, all that stuff is, it makes it way too easy for us to be online and connected to work. But you
Yeah.
have to make that conscious effort of being like, I see that message come in, I see the notifications come in, I choose not to reply to it at this time
Mm.
unless it's literally like an emergency. And how often does that ever happen?
Yeah.
Hardly,
Once
right?
a year, maybe.
Yeah, like there's the biggest emergencies that we ever run into with our company on SOS charging is shipping, right? Like, oh, your shipping's delayed and it's now not going to get to the event on time. So boom, like we got to be on the phone with UPS and we got to take care of that on the spot at the moment. But thank
So there are
goodness.
certain red flags that you'll
Yeah,
recognize
there's
as like
exactly like
urgent.
there's certain markers that we need that we know that
Mm.
we have to pause and actually take care of it. But stuff can wait, man. Like
Stuff can wait. That
stuff
needs
can
to be
wait.
on
You
a that
don't
needs
need
to
to
be like on a
on
t-shirt
a
somewhere.
t-shirt,
Stuff
right?
can
Yeah,
wait.
yeah. Stuff can wait. It doesn't have to be addressed at that moment, and that's a conscious effort that I make personally. Like on
Mm.
my like I'm wearing a smartwatch. I don't get emails on my watch. I purposely turn those off. I only get certain notifications on my watch because I
Hmm.
don't every time it dings, I don't need to look at it and be like, oh, it's an email coming through. Like I don't.
Yeah. Well, it pulls you away, and it pulls your focus away, and
Yeah,
especially like you
yeah.
said, if you're out with your kids and stuff like that, getting ice cream, then you don't want to constantly be looking down at your
Heck
wrist,
no.
and yeah,
Yeah.
and your kids start to wondering what you're spending so much time at. You sound like you're really good at drawing these lines and having these boundaries and stuff like that. Enough so that you've managed to create another thing in there. You've thrown like that DJing into there as well.
Yeah.
So you've got is that something that has to kind of hold its boundaries as well? Do you have to balance that?
Totally. Yeah, there's that plays a huge role in like the balancing the weeks out, right? Because um I'll give you like so for example, like if I'm DJing a wedding on Saturday, that's probably a 12 to 13-hour day depending on what I'm involved in with that wedding, right? For
Mm-hmm.
but if I'm there from ceremony to the very end, like DJs are normally the first vendor in, last vendor out because we got to set up quite a bit and be involved. So um and it's not like if we literally are the last people out because that party ends when we end.
Yeah,
there's
exactly. Yeah, the
there's no
music
way
turns
around
off and then people
it.
start to
Yeah,
leave. Yeah.
yeah, and that's what we're hired to do. But leading up to that Saturday, there's a lot of prep that comes into play beforehand. So 2 3 evenings a week, I'm prepping for
So
that
do
weekend
you carve out
event.
time
Oh,
specifically to do that
absolutely.
then?
Yep. And depending on how extensive my DJ scheduling is, like over the last 2 summers, for example, it was every weekend I was out
Wow.
um, at an event. Uh, so I last year I implemented no meeting Fridays for myself
Okay.
specifically,
Yeah.
because if I'm working Saturday Sunday, when am I going to have a time off? When am I going to have a chance to really take a break? So I implemented no meeting Friday for myself. So I said to the team, I was like, feel free to have meetings, but don't invite me to them
Mm.
unless I'm really needed to be there, right?
Did you get any pushback on that, or
No,
were
no
people
pushback
pretty?
at all. They get it, and we get it,
Yeah.
and it's because we are transparent that way. Like we all understand it, and we don't set strict schedules for anybody on our team.
Mm.
We don't like it. If you get your work done, awesome. If you got to take your kids to a dentist appointment, go do it. Like
Hmm.
there's no, we don't set schedules that way, and yeah, there was no pushback from the team at all. Like in the
Yeah.
beginning, there was a lot of forgetfulness on their part. So I'd still have stuff coming into my calendar, like where I had to. But what I love about our small and mighty team is that we're all fully capable of doing our own thing individually or in pairs. So I
Yeah.
don't like I don't have to be there every time Mike and Alicia jump on a call and vice versa, right? Like Mike doesn't have to be on every call that I'm on.
Mm.
I don't need to be on every call that Mike's on. Alicia doesn't have to be on a call, and that's the same thing.
So it's
So we're all fully
interesting.
capable
Yeah.
of doing our roles to like the very minute detail, um, without having to lean on each other all the
Yeah.
time, which I think is important. I think it's great that we have it that way.
Yeah. It sounds like you guys have done a brilliant job in creating this like you all have the information that you need to function as employees and owners, but you also understand the lanes that you have to operate that each of you operates
Yeah,
in,
yeah,
which is an incredibly amazing balance to have. Where it's like, cool, I know what Mike and Alisha and Joel do, but I also know where my lane is and where it ends, and
Yeah.
which is I have to commend you guys for that, because
Thank you.
I definitely where a lot of your guys' success has been coming from is your communication, your transparency, and your ability to
Yeah.
have those boundaries.
Yeah. The
So
communication is key. Like, in addition to communicate, like your tech stacks, right? Like,
mm,
what do you use it? What are you using to make sure everybody's sort of aware of what's happening? Um, yeah, we have certain tools that we use for communicating and for keeping all of our projects in line and um, all that stuff. So all of that stuff comes into play as well. So it's a lot of like soft skills, but also technology
to
that
to hold it
and
together.
hold it together. You put the soft skills and technology together, and I think it does a pretty good job
Mm-hmm.
of helping everybody sort of do their own thing. Obviously, like as we grow, team wise, people wise, is that going to be the case for?
Will it scale?
I'm excited to find out. I'm excited to
That
find out, like, as we add people to the team, like, is it going to continue to be that way, or um, are we going to learn new things from the new people, like,
mm-hmm.
to even make it even better?
The fact that you're even opening with that sentence that says are we going to learn more, and that you're open to that level of finding out more, I think shows a lot that you'll continue to advance and scale, because you're not closed in on your thinking either. You're open to saying, hey, maybe this person's going to come in and rewrite the way that we think about X, Y, and Z thing.
Yeah.
With that being said, with you being a forward thinker and you guys excited for this growth that's going to come and stuff like that, what does success look like for the two companies, and for you in particular, kind of right now? Like, what does success mean to you?
Uh, Success
Or what
is,
does it mean to, like, what does it mean to be successful?
I think, just being able to do what you want to do on a day to day basis. That's how I
Mm.
look at success, right? Like, if are you able to wake up um, without dreading the day because because you have to go to work? Do you look at tomorrow like, I really enjoy when we can all look at tomorrow and be like, oh, what day is it? Because we don't know what day it is, and it's because we're enjoying today so much that we don't know what tomorrow is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Being able to have the freedom to do what you want when you want is a huge success factor for me.
Mm.
So being able to, like, to say, yeah, I'm going to take that DJ gig this weekend, or not this weekend, but, like, I'll pull up if there's a request, I'll pull up my calendar and be like, yeah, I'm going to take that because I can.
Yeah,
And I'm going to make it work. I'm going to figure out the way to make it work because I've
I
got
like
my
that.
own personal systems in place, right? Um,
Yeah.
with, like, just ways to de-stress on a day-to-day basis, like whether that be taking the dog for a walk, taking Bella for a walk before we come into the office every day, getting that
Mm.
early morning sunlight, and whether it be a 10-15 minute walk or even like a half-hour walk, that stuff helps to man that helps me out so much.
Yeah,
i
those
love
daily
my i
practices
love
are so
my I
important.
love my daily practices of, like, of walking and um, not thinking about work during that walk.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because one of the questions I tend to ask people are, what are three daily practices that they have? Now, you've given us one, which is you walk the dog kind of daily.
Yeah.
What are two other ones that you would say that you do on a daily that help you deal with stress, but also kind of achieve the success that you've just talked about?
Yeah, it's like, I think, on opposite ends of the day. So, like, that the morning walks, I'm very thankful for, grateful for those. At night, the ability to, like, literally veg out if I want to.
Mm.
Like, there are obviously, like, times when I have that laptop open and I'm able to enjoy a TV show at the same
Yeah.
time. Like, that's me. That's my time. And I don't look at that as work time, because I'm enjoying what I'm doing, or whatever it may
Yeah.
be, right? Um, and I know a lot of people don't agree with this, but social media is an escape for me, and I look at it as a
Hmm.
positive escape.
Interesting.
I curate my social media to the point where I enjoy
Yeah.
what I view on my feed, right?
I'm a
Like
big proponent of that, actually.
I think that's very
Yeah.
important. I talk to a lot of people that are like, oh man, I hate it because it's like I just see. I was like, well, change it. Like
Yeah.
it's your account. You can change what shows up on your feed, right?
Yeah.
And there are platforms to stay away from. You don't have to be on
Yeah.
every platform.
I cannot agree with that more than like I did this a while back with my Instagram. I did exactly what you were saying. I realized that I was looking at, you know, dog pictures and not useful things. And
Yeah.
so what I started doing was being very aware to like watch and like kind of inspirational content and motivational things. And now when I sit down and open my Instagram, I can only sit there for a few minutes because pretty soon I'm like, I should probably get up and do something. Like
Right.
all these people are telling me that I need to do this and do that and work hard and achieve my goals. And so I did exactly that. I curated my social media to
Yeah.
push me to do.
But you know, like the question that I throw back at you is like, if you're not on there for only 5 minutes, if you happen to look at your clock and you're like, oh, I've been scrolling through for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, like, do you feel guilty about that?
I do on some platforms, and it's why I've stopped looking at TikTok.
Okay, yeah,
Because that would happen to me on TikTok, like
yeah,
30 minutes, and I'm like, I have just wasted 30 minutes.
right.
Whereas on Instagram, I feel like I've gained at least some
But
wisdom
even
on
then,
there.
so right, so the question again is like, in that 30 minutes that you think you wasted time on TikTok, did you learn anything?
Mm-hmm.
Right, like again, depending on how you curate
Yeah.
your platforms.
Did
um
you use it as like even as a way to decompress? I think as well,
like
right? If you're,
right, like that's
yeah.
why I say like I consider social media as a positive escape for me, because
Mm-hmm.
it
I
is
like
a
that.
way for me to decompress. Like
Yeah.
if when I get home, um, after a day of work, I'm proud to say that I'll jump on Instagram and scroll for
Yeah.
20 minutes. I'm
Yeah.
proud to
Just to
say that because
decompress, and
it's my
I
way
like
of
that.
decompressing, and you can't take it away from me, damn it. No, just kidding.
I like that you are self-aware enough to have that understanding of how you're acting with it, though, which I think is really impressive. Because
Yeah, and it
you've taken ownership onto yourself and how you're doing it versus other people who tend to. It's easy to go to point fingers and say, "Oh, my addiction to social media is Zuckerberg's fault, and Facebook should not be pushing this stuff."
yeah,
Where it's so much harder to look at it and go, "What do I need to do to have this experience be right for me?" And you've identified that within yourself. You go, "Yeah, no, this is a decompression thing for me. That's what I'm
yeah,
going to use it for."
yeah.
Very, very interesting, very unique perspective, and I really like that you brought that up. That's really cool. Really cool. The last question I have for you, Joel, is a bit of a big question, but if you could give people sort of one lesson, one thing only that would help them sort of deal with, manage their stress better or achieve a certain level of success that they would like to achieve, what would that one lesson, the most important lesson that you think you've learned be?
Oh, wow. That's a that's a big question.
Yeah, it is.
That is a big question. Um, uh, okay, so I don't know how I'm going to word this.
No worries, take your time.
It's I I give time for my brain to rewire itself when I'm adjusting.
Mm,
So, for example, if I'm learning a new habit, um, I know for a fact scientifically that it's not going to be an overnight thing. So I will give myself, and there's different numbers out there based on research done, but I'll just use 30 days to rewire
sure.
myself. I'll
Yep.
give myself 30 days to rewire my brain. And I think you'd be surprised that you lose track of the days after like a week.
17, even a week, yeah. So
Um,
you give yourself that
so
grace to be like, this is going to take me 30 days to get. I
yeah,
know it's going to.
yeah,
I'm going to accept that. And then instead of being like, why haven't I got this nailed in yet?
yeah.
Interesting.
And I apply that to every aspect of my life, like whether it's learning or like physical, um,
Mm-hmm.
like working out or like physical activity,
Yeah.
giving
So you
yourself
give
that 30
yourself the
days to give it.
yeah. Give yourself the
Yeah.
grace to grow.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. Well,
That's really good.
right? Because if you think like how just by nature, like things don't grow. There are some things that grow overnight, obviously, but that's
Bamboo, but
how they were created. Bamboo, yeah,
yeah.
right. But that's not how we work as human beings.
Hmm.
So why are we being so hard on ourselves if we're not able to change something after a week? Why are we being so
Yeah.
hard on ourselves for that? That's not how it
I
works.
love
So
that.
at least that's not how I think it works. I'm no
I've
scientist.
never had that. I've never had that answer before. That's very, very unique perspective, and I love it. That's really good. Um, I want to thank you, Joel, for coming on today and for providing all of us here listening with quite a lot of interesting wisdom and kind of value. I think people can take a lot from this about how to communicate, how to draw boundaries within their lives and within their work. And you are showing the benefits of that with what you're doing. So again, I want to just commend you guys for what you're doing with your
Thank you.
businesses, with your personal lives. It really is incredible. Where's the best spot if people want to contact you or find out more from you? Where's the best spot to get in contact with you?
I spend a lot of my time on LinkedIn and Instagram, um, at Joel Olandesca. That's how
Perfect.
you get a hold of me.
Cool.
But
I'll drop the links to that for anybody listening here into the description. The links to both Joel's Instagram and his LinkedIn, as well as to SOS Solutions and Simpl.AR websites. I would recommend if you're in the event space, if you need a DJ, if you need charging, or if you need some AR stuff,
it's
these guys are
all,
the guys to contact. The whole package, it's all there. It's all
it's
right
all
there
there.
with these guys.
One stop shop. Just kidding.
Um, yeah, almost.
Almost.
You'll get there. Another decade.
Yeah.
No, thank you so much, Joel. I
No,
really
thank you.
appreciate you
Like
coming on here.
yeah, thanks for having me on here. Like I think this, I love the format of this. Like it's, the title itself, from stress to success. Like there's so many ways this can go. So it's
Yeah,
cool. Like,
it's fun.
like I just really hope if somebody hears at least one thing from what we've talked about today,
Yeah.
for me,
Find a
that would be a
takeaway.
success.
Yeah. That's for me always what I aim for. I aim for people to come away with at least some sort of lesson from here to make their lives better. And that's what I always hope for. So thank all of you for listening to this. And if you've enjoyed this, I do recommend check up the part 2 of this, which will be the other half of this conversation with Alisha, which is Joel's other half, the other half of these businesses. And it'll be really interesting to see what her perspective on these are going to be. As always, guys, from myself, thank you so much for listening. Check out the other episodes. And I just want to make sure you go out there and, as Joel beautifully put it, make sure to give yourself a little bit of grace to grow today. Thank you so
Hey,
much for listening.
love it.